A life that began as a simple worker in a diamond mine had transformed into one of Africa's most powerful leaders. Now Ibrahim Traoré sat at the same table with Western company CEOs who had come to purchase the mine where his father had died. But not everyone at the table was showing their hand. In the meeting hall of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, representatives of the world's most powerful mining companies were seated. At the head of the table, standing tall in his military uniform, Ibrahim Traoré was calmly listening to the offers for his country's most valuable treasure. Mr. President, Atlantis Mining offers $1.2 billion in cash and a 20-year technology transfer to your country for the Blue Diamond Mine, said Charles Leblanc, his face flushed. This will have diplomatic and economic consequences, President Traoré. Your country doesn't yet have the technology to operate such a mine on its own. Traoré smiled. You're mistaken, Mr. Leblanc. For the past 2 years, more than 200 mining and geology engineers have been trained at Burkina Faso Technical University. Additionally, construction of our lithium processing plant has already begun. Liu Wei interjected, Mr. President, this may be a hasty decision. Perhaps you should reconsider our offer. Your offer isn't even 5% of the real value, Mr. Wei, said Traoré. The lithium reserves at Blue Diamond constitute approximately 15% of the world's currently known reserves. This is a resource worth at least $50 billion. Wilson's face paled. This is impossible. Not impossible, Mr. Wilson. Just a reality you thought only you knew. Traoré opened a folder on the podium. Now I'm presenting you our real offer. The operating rights of the Blue Diamond Mine will remain with Burkina Faso. However, we're open to international partnerships for processing and marketing. Here are our terms. The press members were taking notes frantically as they watched the developments in astonishment. This was a historic moment not just for Burkina Faso, but for all African countries. Outside the meeting hall, Burkina Faso military units had already surrounded the mine. Atlantis Mining's security personnel had been disarmed. The operation had been completed without bloodshed. That afternoon, international reactions began to pour in. The French Foreign Ministry described Burkina Faso's decision as an unacceptable nationalization and threatened sanctions. The U.S. State Department spokesperson, Burkina Faso's unilateral action threatens international investment security. We are evaluating all legal options to protect the rights of American companies. The Chinese Foreign Ministry made a more cautious statement. We hope all parties will find a solution through dialogue. Traoré convened an emergency cabinet at his palace. Finance Minister Konkobo was concerned. French banks have frozen our accounts. The IMF and World Bank have suspended our loans. Our foreign exchange reserves are limited. As expected, said Traoré. Activate Plan B. Implement the agreements we signed with Russia and Iran. Request the first batch payment for lithium in gold. Foreign Minister Traoré. We're receiving messages of support from the African Union. The leaders of Mali, Niger, and Guinea have announced their support for our decision. Also, BRICS countries are giving positive signals. We need to explain to our people, said Traoré. I'll speak on national television tonight. That evening, the people of Burkina Faso gathered around their televisions. Traoré spoke calmly but resolutely. My dear citizens, today we opened a new page in our country's history. The Blue Diamond Mine now belongs entirely to us. They hid the true value of this mine from us for years. They showed us only the diamonds, but concealed the lithium deposits, which are the real treasure. He showed his father's blue diamond piece in front of the camera. My father died in this mine. In memory of him and thousands of Burkinabe workers like him, we reclaimed these resources today. There will be difficult days ahead. Western powers will put economic pressure on us. Prices may rise, there may be shortages of some products, but we will resist together, because freedom has a price, and we are ready to pay it. Following the speech, thousands began to gather in the streets of Ouagadougou. People were celebrating their country's bold move. Chants of Burkina Faso Halka, Burkina Faso belongs to the people, rose. A week after the signing ceremony, international sanctions began in full force. Western banks cut ties with Burkina Faso. The IMF froze loan agreements. The French, American, and Chinese media labeled Traoré as radical and dangerous. Traoré gathered his team in his palace office. We were prepared. Now we move to phase 2. Economy Minister Diallo looked worried. Mr. President, our dollar reserves are depleting. We're struggling to import. Our people might not be able to meet their basic needs. We expected this, said Traoré. That's why we've been implementing the Food Independence Program for the past 3 years. Our farmers can now meet 80% of our basic food needs. Defense Minister Ouedraogo. French intelligence has begun arming some opposition groups. There's movement in several regions in the north. We've strengthened our army and educated our people, said Traoré. If necessary, we'll defend every village, every neighborhood. The next day, Burkina Faso signed new trade agreements with Russia and Brazil. An independent consortium from China offered to build a lithium processing facility. Turkey offered to provide mining equipment. We just need time, Traoré said in an address to his people. The first lithium from the Blue Diamond mine will enter the international market in 3 months. Until then, we must resist together. While Western media claimed Traoré was committing economic suicide, messages of support began to arrive from other African countries. Mali, Guinea, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Africa made statements supporting Burkina Faso's sovereign right. A movement called the Traoré model started especially among young Africans. Hashtags like Our Blue Diamonds and Africa Eyes Ours trended globally on social media. 3 weeks later, the first serious crisis erupted. General Boubacar attempted a French-backed coup. At midnight, he surrounded the presidential palace with a small military unit. But Traoré's intelligence was prepared. The coup attempt was suppressed within hours. Footage broadcast on national television showed General Boubacar and other coup plotters in custody. Seized documents revealed that French intelligence had financed the coup plan. This event strengthened the people's support for Traoré even more. The streets filled with crowds chanting, "Death to traitor Boubacar!" However, Traoré chose a different path. Instead of executing Boubacar, he called him to testify in a live broadcast. "General Boubacar," said Traoré in a calm voice, "today I want to ask you not your punishment, but why you betrayed your country." Boubacar answered, trembling, "The French offered me 5 million euros. They promised a new life, a luxury villa in Europe. What about your country's independence, the future of your people? What is their value?" The general remained silent, bowing his head. "Here is the clearest example of how the West controls Africa," said Traoré, turning to the cameras. "They divide us by using the weaknesses within ourselves." This event also resonated in international public opinion. France denied any involvement in the coup attempt, but the evidence was clear. Many citizens in Western countries began to question their government's role in such activities. The West's economic pressure continued for 6 months. The people of Burkina Faso went through difficult times. There were shortages of some basic products. Prices rose. Street protests began. Traoré addressed the nation on national television every evening. "Freedom has a price, my brothers and sisters, but this price is less than the cost of centuries of exploitation." At the end of the 6th month, an unexpected development occurred in the world economy. Electric vehicle manufacturers began to experience serious problems in lithium supply. Prices rose rapidly. The lithium reserves of Blue Diamond were now more valuable than ever. Traoré held a meeting open to the international press. "Burkina Faso is open to world markets under fair trade conditions. However, we will never relinquish control of our resources." The first breakthrough came from the German automotive giant Volkswagen. The company signed a direct agreement with Burkina Faso, promising to establish a technical training center in the country in exchange for lithium supply. Other companies followed. Tesla, Ford, Toyota. Major automotive manufacturers had to sit at the table with Burkina Faso to overcome the lithium crisis. However, there were also challenging struggles within the country during this process. The operation of the Blue Diamond mine turned out to be more complex than expected. Technical problems, staff shortages, and logistical difficulties were slowing down production. Traoré was constantly visiting the mine day and night. He worked with engineers trying to solve problems on site. One night, as he was working late in his office at the mine, Konaté, the old miner, knocked on the door. "Mr. President, I wanted to talk to you," said the old man. "Please, Konaté, I owe you a lot." "My father also worked in this mine," said Konaté, looking out the window. "And his father too. For 3 generations, we gave the wealth of this land to foreigners." "We're not giving it anymore," said Traoré. "Now this wealth belongs to us." "Yes, but it's not enough," said Konaté. "Operating the mine is just the beginning. What's really important is how we use this wealth. Konate pulled a small notebook from his pocket. Here are the names of all the workers in the mine. Those who lost their lives, got sick, became disabled while working here in the last 30 years. They're all here. Traoré took the notebook and turned the pages. Hundreds of names, hundreds of lives. What do you want me to do, Konate? Allocate part of the income from the mine to these people and their families. Create a fund, not just for them, but for all miners. Health insurance, education scholarships, retirement rights. Traoré nodded. You're right. It's not enough just to take back the mine. We must also ensure justice. The next day, Traoré convened the cabinet and gave instructions for the establishment of the Miners' Justice Fund. 15% of the income from Blue Diamond would be allocated to improve the living conditions of miners and their families. 8 months later, the IMF and World Bank lifted the sanctions. Western banks began to work with Burkina Faso again. But the terms were different now. The new mining agreements, known as the Blue Diamond Model, stipulated that the majority stake in natural resources would remain with the host countries. Burkina Faso had reached a position where it could dictate its own terms. 1 year after the nationalization of the Blue Diamond Mine, a brand new community began to form around the mine. Modern housing, schools, hospitals were built. A new living area was created for more than 2,000 workers and their families working in the mine. Burkina Faso's first lithium processing facility was rising in an area close to the mine. Engineers from Russia and China were training local teams. Young Burkinabe engineers were learning complex processing procedures. One morning, Traoré visited the mine. With him were young students from all over the country. They were all students of the newly established Blue Diamond Technical Academy. This mine is no longer just a mine, Traoré told the students. This is a symbol of our independence and our future. The students toured different sections of the mine. They saw the lithium extraction process, diamond processing facilities, quality control laboratories. One of the oldest workers at the mine approached Traoré. Mr. President, I want to show you something. The worker took Traoré to an old section of the mine. Here, at the site of the 1994 collapse, there was now a small monument. The names of the workers who lost their lives in the accident were written on it. At the top was the name of Ibrahim Traoré. We made this, said the old worker. We won't forget them anymore. Traoré touched his father's name. His eyes were filled with tears. Thank you, he said quietly. That day, a special ceremony was held at the mine. The first lithium batch extracted from Blue Diamond was ready to be exported in processed form. Its value was approximately $500 million. In his speech at the ceremony, Traoré said, "Today, we're not just exporting a mineral. We're declaring our independence, our dignity, and our right to determine our own destiny to the world." The international journalists attending the ceremony were amazed at how a move they had labeled as madness a year ago had now turned into a success. 1 year later, Traoré was at his father's grave. With him stood the first graduates of the newly established mining academy, all young Burkinabe. My father left me a small blue diamond, Traoré told the young people, but that wasn't his real legacy. The real legacy was the belief that the wealth of our lands belongs to us. In the distance, the new facilities of the Blue Diamond Mine were visible. Now all the employees were Burkinabe. The mine's profits were being used to improve the country's infrastructure, education, and health system. A young miner stepped forward. "Mr. President, we want to give you something." A small box was handed to Traoré. Inside was a ring made of blue diamond, engraved with his father's name. "This diamond piece was extracted from the vein where your father worked," said the young miner. "Now we provide health insurance and education scholarships to the family of every worker in the mine. No one will have to grow up without a father." Traoré put the ring on his finger. Western powers were still maintaining economic pressure, but Burkina Faso was resilient, and now the future of the country was in its own hands. "When my father died in the mine, I was 8 years old," said Traoré. "That day I made a promise to myself. One day, the wealth of our country would belong to our own people." That same day, a new facility was opened next to the Blue Diamond Mine, the Ibrahim Traoré Lithium Processing Plant. This was Africa's first full-capacity lithium processing facility. Leaders from around the world were present at the opening ceremony. Burkina Faso had become a respected power in international relations. As Charles Leblanc watched the ceremony on television, a message came to his phone. Atlantis Mining's shares had lost 40% of their value. The company was on the brink of bankruptcy 1 year after Traoré's move. Burkina Faso's story became an inspiration for other African countries. Within 2 years, 5 different countries made similar moves. This approach, known as the Traoré model, was seen as the beginning of a new era in international relations. Nigeria took back control of its oil reserves, the Democratic Republic of Congo, its cobalt mines, South Africa, its platinum deposits. Traoré addressed other leaders at an African Union meeting. Our natural resources have the power to change our destiny. But these resources bring real wealth only to countries that not only hold them in their soil, but can process them and offer them to the world as value. Western powers tried different strategies against Africa's new economic independence movement. Military coups were supported in some countries. Economic crises were fueled in others. But Burkina Faso's success had provided a roadmap for other countries. Traoré gave a speech in Geneva as a guest of the International Trade Union Confederation. To change the unfair structure of the global economy, we must first ensure justice in our own countries. A miner working at Blue Diamond can now provide a healthy future for his children. This is the true meaning of fair sharing of wealth. Charles Leblanc was forced to resign from his big company. In his last interview, he said, "Perhaps the era of dominating Africa's resources has ended." 5 years later, Traoré was invited to London to speak at an international mining conference. The same Western media that once labeled him as radical and dangerous now described him as visionary and reformist. At the conference, his former rival Robert Wilson was also present. He had left his position as CEO of Liberty Resources and now worked as an independent consultant. "President Traoré," said Wilson, extending his hand, "it's an honor to meet you." Traoré smiled and shook his hand. "Mr. Wilson, we met 5 years ago. You'll remember." Wilson bowed his head. "Yes, but we didn't understand each other then. Now I see how right your approach was to managing Africa's resources." "Thank you for showing this understanding, even if it's late," said Traoré. At the conference, Traoré gave a presentation titled "The Burkina Faso Model for Sustainable Mining." The mining company executives in the hall were eager to learn how a strategy they once saw as madness had succeeded. 5 years later, Burkina Faso had become unrecognizable. Modern buildings were rising in the capital Ouagadougou, while schools, hospitals, and clean water systems were being built in rural areas. The country's gross national product had tripled. Child mortality rates had halved. The literacy rate had risen from 40% to 75%. The Blue Diamond mine was no longer just a mine, but an education and technology center. Every year, students from all over Africa were studying here. Traoré visited his father's grave again one morning. This time he was alone. He took off the Blue Diamond ring from his finger and placed it on the tombstone. "Your mission is complete, Father," he said quietly. "Blue Diamond now belongs to our people. And not just Blue Diamond. All our mines. All our resources." That night, Traoré stood on the palace balcony looking at the city. The lights of Ouagadougou seemed brighter than ever. In his hand, he held the Blue Diamond piece left by his father. "Do you see, Father?" he whispered. "We're building a country you couldn't even dream of." In the distance, the lights of the Blue Diamond mine were shining. Now these lights represented not wealth flowing outward, but power remaining within the country. For Traoré, this was just the beginning. Looking at the Blue Diamond piece, he remembered his father's words. "Son, real wealth is not in the land, but in the hearts of the people living on that land." And now, this wealth belonged to his people, the sharp-eyed French CEO. This figure is quite generous compared to similar mines. Traoré's face showed no change in expression. Liu Wei, the Chinese official sitting at the other end of the table, took the floor. "Dragon Minerals offers $1.4 billion. Additionally, we pledge $200 million for training local workers." American businessman Robert Wilson interjected, "Liberty Resources proposes $1.5 billion and a 12% annual profit share from the mine's operations." With each offer, Traoré's economic advisor Kabore excitedly took notes. These offers could transform the country's economy. Thank you, gentlemen, Traoré finally said. But before I make a decision, I want to hear from you why you want this mine so badly. Because you all know that Blue Diamond is not just a diamond mine. The atmosphere in the room suddenly tensed. Eyes darted between each other. LeBlanc cleared his throat. Mr. President, Blue Diamond produces some of the world's highest quality diamonds. The rare blue tones are particularly valuable in the luxury market. Is that all? Traoré asked, not taking his eyes off LeBlanc. Of course, mining operations always have multiple sources of value, Wilson interjected. From secondary minerals to logistical infrastructure, many factors determine a mine's value. Traoré slowly stood up and began walking around the conference table. Gentlemen, I'm going to be straightforward with you. Before coming to these negotiations, I knew exactly what Blue Diamond is. And I think you know too. 3 days ago, I encountered an old miner in northern Burkina Faso, said Traoré as he walked toward the window. A man named Joseph Konaté. He worked at Blue Diamond 30 years ago, and he told me a very interesting story. The room was completely silent. Small beads of sweat began to form on LeBlanc's forehead. Before we continue this meeting, I'd like to show you a video, said Traoré, signaling to his assistant. On the large screen in the meeting room, the image of an elderly man appeared. Joseph Konaté was holding a document with his bony hands. My name is Joseph Konaté. I worked on the geological research team at Blue Diamond Mine between 1990 and 1995. In 1994, during our drilling in the southern part of the mine, we discovered a vast lithium deposit beneath the main diamond vein. We submitted our reports to Atlantis Mining, but the company concealed this information from the public. LeBlanc quickly stood up. This is unacceptable. Who is this man? These claims are completely baseless. Traoré calmly said, Please sit down, Mr. LeBlanc. The video isn't finished yet. Konaté continued, I was working with Amara Traoré. We both understood the significance of this discovery, but the company management buried our reports. A week later, a suspicious accident occurred in the mine. Amara lost his life. I escaped and have been hiding ever since. The screen went dark. Traoré returned to the table and opened the file in front of him. Mr. LeBlanc, Mr. Wei, Mr. Wilson, I have geological reports dated 1994. Also, here are communications between senior executives at Atlantis Mining. They all confirm Konaté's claims. He spread a map from the file onto the table. As you can see, the real value of Blue Diamond doesn't come from diamonds. The lithium deposits underneath constitute approximately 15% of the world's known reserves. And today, in an era of electric vehicle revolution, this lithium is far more valuable than diamonds. The CEOs exchanged worried glances. Wilson cleared his throat. These kinds of geological assessments can be speculative. Extensive research is needed to verify the actual reserves. The research has already been done, Mr. Wilson, said Traoré, by your companies, and you know the results. That evening, Traoré stood alone on the palace balcony. In his hand was the only thing left from his father, Amara Traoré, from 30 years ago. A small, matte blue diamond piece. Economy Minister Diallo approached him. Mr. President, the offers are extraordinary. This deal will enrich our country. Traoré shook his head. My father was a simple worker at this mine, Diallo. He lost his life during a collapse in 1994. All that was left to us was this small diamond piece, and great pain. The French company Atlantis continued to operate the mine without paying any compensation, Traoré continued. But before my father died, he told me something. The real treasure of Blue Diamond is not the diamonds everyone knows about. Diallo looked puzzled. What do you mean? In 1994, my father and Konaté discovered the lithium deposits in the mine. They reported this information to company management, but the management covered up this discovery. Lithium wasn't as valuable then as it is today, but it was still an important resource. Lithium? This is incredible information. Yes, and today it's the essential material for batteries needed in electric vehicles. The oil of the future. Traoré held the small blue diamond piece up to the light. When my father was working in the mine, shortly before his death, he discovered a different vein. He reported it to his superiors, but they erased any record of this discovery. My father's death wasn't an accident, Diallo. They silenced him. How do you know this? Because my father's colleague Konaté is still alive. He's been hiding all these years, but last month he contacted me and told me everything. He also gave me these. Traoré pulled an old, worn notebook from the inside pocket of his jacket. My father's geological notes. He drew the first map of the lithium deposits in the mine. He understood how valuable they were. Diallo looked at the notebook. So this meeting... A trap, said Traoré, with determination in his eyes. A trap to see how long Western companies have known the truth and how they're playing us. Traoré went to the edge of the balcony and looked at the city. The lights of Ouagadougou were shining in the darkness of night. My father died when I was 8 years old, Diallo. My mother had to raise me alone. Often we couldn't find bread to eat. We couldn't pay school fees. And all this time, foreign companies were stealing our country's wealth. Diallo bowed his head. Burkina Faso's story was the common story of many African countries. But now we're going to end this situation, said Traoré, his voice strengthening with determination. Not just Blue Diamond, but all our mines. All our resources will belong to our people. At midnight, Traoré was holding a secret meeting with a few trusted advisors. Intelligence Chief Sankara opened the files in his hand. Confirmed, Mr. President. The lithium reserves in the mine are at least 20 times the known value. What about the companies making the offers? Asked Traoré. All three know. Atlantis, Dragon, and Liberty. They all have this information. But they didn't tell us. The intelligence chief opened a laptop and showed some emails on the screen. The CEO of French Atlantis, LeBlanc, said in an internal meeting 2 years ago, "When we acquire Burkina Faso's lithium reserves, our company's value will multiply. We should start with the lowest possible offer because Africans don't know the true value." Traoré's jaw tightened. The others? Dragon Minerals similarly reported to the Chinese government that the real value of Blue Diamond comes not from diamonds but from lithium reserves. Liberty described the mine as Africa's secret lithium treasure in a confidential presentation to Wall Street investors. Traoré stood up. Tomorrow is the final meeting, and we have a big surprise for them. Defense Minister Ouedraogo looked concerned. Mr. President, such a move could be dangerous. These companies have powerful states behind them. France, USA, China, all can impose economic and military sanctions. We're prepared, Traoré said resolutely. For the past 2 years, we've been working to establish alternative trade channels. We've made secret agreements with Russia, Brazil, Turkey, and Iran. Additionally, we've already acquired the technology and equipment needed to set up the lithium processing facility. Economy Minister Diallo looked astonished. But how did you accomplish this? Because I've been preparing since my father's death, Diallo. Preparing for this day, for this moment. Intelligence Chief Sankara brought another file to the screen. Mr. President, we've also detected activities of Western intelligence services. Especially French DGSE is in contact with some opposition elements in our country. They're preparing the ground for a possible coup attempt. Names? Asked Traoré. General Boubacar, Colonel Zida, and former Economy Minister Traoré. All three received significant amounts of money from France. Traoré nodded. Continue monitoring them, but don't touch them for now. First, let's secure the mine, then we'll deal with the traitors inside. Meanwhile, in one of the city's luxury hotels, Charles LeBlanc was talking on the phone. Don't worry, Traoré knows nothing. Tomorrow he'll sign the agreement and Blue Diamond will be ours. When we start operating the lithium deposits, this company's value will increase tenfold. Liu Wei was conferring with Beijing in his own room. Americans and French have also submitted their offers, but ours is the highest. President Traoré is running a country facing economic difficulties. He can't refuse the money. Robert Wilson was leisurely sipping his drink at his hotel's bar. To the men beside him, "When I get this agreement signed, our factories in Detroit will become the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturer. Lithium, that's where the real power lies." None of them knew that Traoré had already set his plan in motion. The next morning, preparations for the signing ceremony were complete. The international press was ready to record Burkina Faso's largest economic agreement. Charles LeBlanc, Liu Wei, and Robert Wilson entered the hall, wondering which company would be the winner. All three were confident. Traoré arrived right on time and took the podium. "Distinguished guests, we are here today to sign an agreement that will shape the future of our country." LeBlanc smiled confidently. Traoré continued. "However, the agreement we will sign is not the one we discussed yesterday." A murmur rose in the hall. I would like to announce that we are rejecting the offers of Atlantis Mining, Dragon Minerals, and Liberty Resources. The three CEOs looked at each other in shock. Instead, today, I am announcing the establishment of the Burkina Faso National Mining Company. The Blue Diamond Mine now belongs entirely to the people of Burkina Faso. LeBlanc stood up angrily. This is unacceptable. It's against international agreements. What's against agreements, said Traoré in a calm voice, is hiding the lithium deposits in the mine from us, trying to steal our country's natural resources while knowing the true value of the reserves. Traoré pressed a button, and the large screen in the hall displayed the company's secret communications, geological reports, and detailed maps of the lithium deposits. The game is over, gentlemen. LeBlanc,